Turn over your Facebook, turn over your Instagram. Like if you really want to have an impact and have an authentic conversation, and also see who your friends are, turn your platform over. So my work exists at the intersections of being Black and being woman, because I can be nothing else but that. When I step into a room, that's all people see. And that has given me some privileges, but then also it oppresses us, it pushes us down in a lot of ways. And for me, the way that that shows up is focusing on Black women and Black girls in politics and creating spaces for them to thrive. When we think about the wealth that's given to white folks, the positions, the status, the resources, in order for them to be able to advance themselves politically and make it into so many of these spaces so easily, I want to create that wedge that opens the door for Black women and Black girls. I believe that when Black women win, we all win. Across the country, we see that Black women, when they're at the helm of policy, more often than not, it's a more holistic policy. It's a policy that's going to do the most good for the most people. Even when we go to the ballot box, we're not just voting for ourselves, right? We're bringing neighbors, we're bringing friends, everybody in the house got to go, the whole church is going, and we're voting on behalf of all of those interests. So imagine what could happen if we were in positions to be able to make policy, if we were in positions to be able to be the folks in leadership that are developing these holistic policies that we vote on behalf of and that we hope and demand from folks. So that's where a lot of my work is. I'm also a candidate for Florida House District 95 because I want a seat at that table. And I know that we need more of us in positions like that. Like, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And we can't, Black women are really good about being humble, and really good about being like, no, 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 you got it, I need more time or whatever. So this has been like a learning lesson in me that's like, no, 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 this is our time. This is our power. And instead of constantly advancing other people, what does it look like when we step in and we take the reins? And I want to be a prototype also for Black girls to show what it looks like to run an authentic race, where we can keep our hair in locks, we can keep our hair in an Afro puff, where we can say curse words every so often, where we can show up as our full selves, right? Authentically for all that we are, and still run that race and win. I'm also a founding member of Black Lives Matter Alliance, Broward. So my heart is always in the streets, co-organizing protests and trying to figure out the ways to weave protests with policy making and policy makers. How do we get elected leaders to the table to listen to the stories and the demands of organizers in everything that we're doing to advance them both together? So that's been an interesting moment in the midst of this campaign, and everything that's going on is, how do we get electeds to understand what needs to be done, the transformation, not the reform, but the transformation that needs to happen on behalf of not only our people, but for the health of everybody. If we can transform these systems to make them better, everybody wins. So that's the quick and dirty of what I do.
I'm so excited. Like, I have chills, but we'll go there. Nancy, you're up.
I just felt all of that between Jasmine and Christina. I'm just like, you know what? This is beautiful within itself. So just want to let you two know that you both are an inspiration, not only to Black women, but the Black girls who are watching and saying, like, if they can do it, I can do it as well. So with that being said, I am Nancy Mateer. I am a Black woman. I am a Haitian-American, and I'm also a scientist. And when we say scientist, a scientist, some people look at me and they're like, what? So I am an environmental scientist with a policy background. I make data look sexy. So I love numbers, I love playing with numbers, and I love pulling statistics. I'm also a community advocate. I've been able to advocate internationally in Haiti, where I, for water access to Haitians, clean water access to Haitians, also environmental justice after the cholera pandemic, what that looked like for people to have safe drinking water, also public health, having Haitians have access to public health and being able to access that throughout the island. And also been organizing domestically, been organizing in South Florida now since 2016. I believe that's when myself and Jasmine's path crossed during Black Lives Alliance Broward. That's where I really got my foot through the door here in South Florida. Also organized at the YMCA as a community health worker, ensuring that the Six Trunks corridor had access to fresh produce, food justice in a food desert, and was able to organize the New Florida Majority as their climate justice program manager, where I led their climate justice work for a little over 2 years. And now I'm currently a coalition manager with Neo Philanthropy, where I work with organizations that center reproductive justice in the state of Florida. As we are seeing from a legislative standpoint, women's bodies are constantly under attack. It is important that we have people who understand the importance of women having a voice, a choice, and to say what they want with their bodies. So being a community advocate, really fighting for justice is at the core of me. It's in my bloodline. When we talk about our ancestors as Haitian-Americans, it's like, this is what we fought for, right? They created the roots. They cut down the tree trunk, but we were the roots that came out of that. And so I carry that history with pride, and I'm always ready to hit the streets and shout loud and say, my people deserve more.
Right. Thank you for that, Nancy. I often laugh because I remember getting in a lot of trouble as a child, and my mom would say I have like desaline blood, like I have a rebellious blood in me. But that really kind of segues really nicely into like when we see what's going on in the country right now. My sister and I often have a conversation about how air conditioning and work keeps Americans really, I think like maybe it lessens your anger. And I often say that, the reason why, we watch the news and we see Haiti, like people are mad, they're upset. I said, look, we know this kind of upset. And this is what it takes often to see real change happen. Until people are this upset, what we're seeing in our country right now, change doesn't happen. And so tell me, y'all, what's going on? How did we get here? We've had many of George Floyd's, but we haven't seen this level of, you're talking about 50 states protesting. How did we get here? And what do you think about what's being suggested in terms of reform? And if y'all can kind of like bring it down to Broward County and Dade County as well, that'll be really helpful. I'm going to start with you, Jasmine. What does additional resources look like for community? So when we're talking about divesting from, let's say, police departments, and maybe policing looking very different from what it is right now, what can we imagine imagine with those additional resources? What can we do?
So thank you for that question. The first thing that comes to mind is a mental health or social worker at every crime scene that the police officer is called to, right? Sometimes a wellness check is just someone having an episode and they need to talk through whatever that issue is. That can alleviate a lot of the arrest, a lot of escalation. So we don't need to de-escalate from something. So really investing in that, a social worker at all these scenes can help with people's just mental health. That's really investing in someone's mental health in our community. Programming, youth programming. A lot of the issues that we're seeing with young people is because they're bored. There's no youth programming that's keeping them engaged. If we are investing funds into whatever they like to do, where maybe a gaming center, whatever it is, that you'll see a lot more kids off the streets and trying to keep themselves occupied. And lastly, restorative justice. We don't need to put everybody in prison. We don't need to arrest everyone. There are ways for us to seek justice, but in a way that everybody has a voice at that table. So really expanding on what restorative justice looks like throughout different municipalities can be a great way for us to reform this justice system. So those are three things, beautiful things that I see coming out of this if we just repurpose the funds that go into police departments.
Christina, what about you? What are you thinking?
So I have lots of thoughts, but I will say that part of in doing the context analysis that I was doing before, what we are seeing on display on our streets across America is the militarization of the police. I do not understand why there is a tank in front of the Freedom Tower for a peaceful protest. I mean, I also have an opinion about saying peaceful protest versus just a protest. I don't believe in that disclaimer, but I just think of, and I think my Caribbean and Latin American and immigrant folks who are watching now will feel this. My family did not come to this country so that I will have to debate whether exercising my First Amendment right compared to being approached with military equipment. Like this it doesn't make sense. I find it morally reprehensible, and that's not the America that I believe in. And the country that we are trying to build. I think all of us can agree that we are committed to bettering and perfecting this union, whether that is through public service, community work, community organizing, activism, or using our time, talent, and treasure for our communities. And to be met with riot gear, to be met with tear gas, which you don't even use in foreign wars, should really have people questioning why local police departments are equipped with this equipment. And they're spending millions of dollars on this equipment. And not only is it that our local, our municipal budgets are acquiring this through their own budget line items, they're also getting federal grants to get leftover stock from our foreign wars and saying, hey, here's some free tanks. Like that, like it really exposes where our priorities are. And it really juxtaposes what we value and who we value. Because not a month ago, when there were actually armed, not peaceful protesters, they were met with nothing but a surgical mask. Literally, a surgical mask, and not even a nightstick, right? And so I think that this moment is exposing what policing actually is in America versus what people who have very few interactions with the police experience. I will say, point of privilege, I have never called 911 or the police in my life. And that's for a variety of reasons. A, I don't trust them. And I have family members that are police officers, many family members that are police officers. Like, I don't trust them. I don't think that it would solve a situation in the moment for exactly the reasons that were laid out before by folks on the line. And so I think of if you live in, like, policing in a suburb looks completely different. I live in Miami Shores. I live 2 blocks away from a police station. I barely see them. I don't have any interaction with them. Like, it has no impact on my day-to-day life unless like somebody's speeding down 2nd Avenue, to be real. That's the primary purpose of what they do. Like, versus if I lived in the urban core where you literally see, like, just think about like by Miami Worker Center. You see people in the Burger King. You see police on the corner. You see police patrolling the block. Like, the sheer number of instances where you can unintentionally interact with a police officer in an adversarial way is very different depending on your zip code. And so when you have people saying that they no longer believe in this institution because of their lived experience, we have to believe that and say, like, I think the biggest challenge is, okay, well, if we don't have police, what do we have? And what happens if somebody breaks into my house? How many of you have had your house broken into? Like, is this happening rampantly? Like, all of a sudden that's going to change when historically, like, crime is decreasing, and it is not correlated to the increase in policing. So we have to really question our bias, question our understanding of what we value and how we want government to show up for us, because ultimately we are the ones that hold government accountable. And I think the pathway forward, whether that's defunding, divesting, abolishing, whatever the future looks like, accountability has to be at the center. And civilian oversight of police is a must.
Right. You know, it's funny. I'm gonna come to Nora because Nora has 2 questions burning. But it's so funny because I often think about, you know, I am pretty sure that if I do something, y'all, not only will I make the Channel 7, Channel 10 news, y'all will be at my court hearings, y'all have to post bail for me. Like, there will be absolute accountability for my wrongdoing. And so I just think that and that's what I experienced at protests. I think that there's this interaction with, you know, police officers that can be like, how dare you all come out here and protest? And that's just like, actually, this is all right. And I think that actually you all should be held accountable because the Bible says judgment starts within. If you, you know, that's the thing that I think that we need to kind of think about. Like, why wouldn't y'all go to jail if you do something wrong? And I can't reconcile why there's this intimidation. There's all this stuff that happens at peaceful protests. And I'm like, but wait, what just happened here? You know, all that to say, there's a lot of feelings about folks, officers who say to me, you know, are y'all trying to say I don't have a job? There are people who, like, you know, Black officers at that. I was listening to a live yesterday and came down an elevator and a cop was in there listening to the live. And he was like, oh, that stuff, y'all trying to get me out of a job. And those are real feelings because people don't have a opportunity to imagine what it could be. I struggle with imagination because all we have is right now, at least for me, the pressures of right now haven't allowed for us, I think, our communities to really imagine what could our communities look like with a different kind of policing. Nora, help us with the questions.
Yes, so we have a question here, and the question is from Mabella Colon. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong, but first she wants to start off by saying that you all are a very inspiring group of women. And she asks, what advice do you have for youth who want to organize or mobilize, advocate, and help Black communities with the Black Lives Movement? Where do they start? What are activities they can do to feel like they are making a difference?
Sure. Nancy, do you want to take that? And then Jasmine as a follow-up.
So first of all, I want to say to the youth that y'all are the future. I love seeing you out here and holding me accountable. I had the privilege to help assist not only a few youth 2 weeks ago here in Coral Springs. Coral Springs don't have protests. I was happy to see that, right? And there is another protest tomorrow where I've been helping a young gentleman get his thoughts together. So first and foremost, whenever you can, to gather, to organize, do that. And that can look like an action, that can look like a petition, that can look like you hitting the streets and saying, well, your parents pay taxes, so I can show up how I want to show up. And to know that protest is a fundamental human right guaranteed by the US Constitution and the First Amendment. So no one can take that away from you. So protesting first. And if you can, donate and volunteer to organizations doing the work. We have Avanse Ansanm, who needs help with phone banking for the census. Like, we desperately need that assistance. We have Family Action Movement Network, who needs help registering people to vote. We also have Santla Neighborhood Center, who are doing feeding programs in their communities. We have Black Lives Matter Alliance Broward, who needs help with actions, calling people, keeping them engaged, really interacting with local officials and making sure they're doing the things they said that they're doing when they asked for our vote. And we all work. So I'm not saying y'all have all the time in your hands, but you have a little bit more time than we do, right? And you can help assist with that and leverage that. I would love to see y'all. I know when it's time for me to put up my walking shoes, I just want to show up. You tell me where to go, I just want to show up. I want y'all to organize this. So you just learning from folks like Christina and Jasmine will basically pave the way for future. And hopefully we're not marching about this in 20, 30 years. So that's how you can get involved now.
Jasmine, actually, I want to point to you and ask you to go even further. There's been a lot of talk about people putting on protests that may have not necessarily put on protests before. And I know Nancy helped out the one in Coral Springs, but there's also a lot of, while protest is a fundamental right, there's also a lot of risk and liability that organizers may take or may be responsible for when organizing a protest. Can you talk about what does it look like for someone to organize a protest and how you learned in coalition in the spaces? I know you and Nancy were hard down in 2016. I don't know where I was, but yeah, talk about what that looks like for you to organize it as well.
I would say that I learned from organizers and also after being arrested on accident. So it's learning from not only history and historic movements, but also people in this moment right now that have spent their time learning from other movements and planning protests. So I say this to police officers all the time, like, we understand that we set a tone. And I even said to some city officials the other day, I completely understand that if we wanted to, we could burn this entire city down. But that is not our goal here today, right? We are setting a tone that is absolutely about outrage, but is more so about the power of what we can do in community. And understanding that means that we need to take care of our people. So at our actions, we make sure we have medics, we have legal observers to watch what's happening, we have marshals and peacekeepers, we have police liaisons so that people don't have to interact with police. We teach people that you don't have to talk to police. We teach people kind of the rules and how to maneuver and all of that in the space to keep them safe, which is why in Fort Lauderdale, with over 3,000 people, we were able to have a peaceful, like Christina said, lots of thoughts around that word, but we were able to have an action without much incident for 4 hours. It was the police that escalated it when he shoved a 19-year-old to the ground that was down on her knees. So, I mean, I know that the Alliance right now is trying to build an infrastructure to be able to teach people, because it is a liability. Mm-hmm. If you want to plan a protest and you don't realize what you're doing, people can get hit by cars. You run the risk of police interference. You run the risk of an action escalating because of someone coming in or saying something, or all of these different things that you need to consider. You run the risk of someone fainting at your action because it's hot in Florida. We need water and snacks at every action. You run the risk of someone being off messaging, or you run the risk of just not doing it in the way that you want. There's some people that want to organize an action this weekend and claim that they're doing it in support of Black Lives Matter, but what they're trying to put on sounds like a mini pride. Like, that's not what this moment is. That's not what we're doing here. This is not for your entertainment. Like, we're not doing this in coalition with police. We don't get permits. That's not what we're doing. So we're trying to do better, especially in this moment where, again, people are just popping up with actions, to be able to provide the resources and skills for folks to, above all else, keep people safe. And then also make sure we're all in line with the same messaging. I saw an action where the first person that was going to speak at the action was the police chief. But why? Like, why? Or another action that said this action is being planned in conjunction with the police. But the entire messaging of this moment is against police brutality. So why would that even be a thought that crosses your mind? Also understanding that people just don't know. People just don't know. They don't understand the process and they think that that's what's supposed to happen. So I think that there needs to be more learning as much as we can amongst all of us about how things have been done and been successful in the past. And then also right here, right now, how are we doing that again?
Right. Christina, do you want to add something?
Yes. So I am all about the safety and liability part of it. So sorry if I'm going to be a little Debbie Downer right now, but I will say that you cannot just randomly do an action. Please understand that people like planning, thoughtfulness, contingency planning, bail funds, legal folks, lawyers and legal workers on standby, legal and lawyers on the ground, documentation, all of those things go into it. And so if you ask questions of an organizer of an event and they can't answer the basics, then you should be concerned. And you're also putting yourself at risk, because if things go out of control, they don't have your back because they are simply not prepared. And so I want to stress that. And the other thing is, with my own hat on, one of the biggest challenges that we're trying to navigate right now is that green card holders don't understand that it's not just an issue of ICE and CBP being at action to scoop undocumented folks. Actually, if you are detained with certain charges, it can actually escalate and threaten your green card. So one of the only way I like to say to protect your First Amendment right is to be a citizen. So hit me up if you want to begin your naturalization process, but quick plug, but really you have to do a risk analysis in participating in an action. And I encourage everybody to participate in an action. It is transformative. It is empowering. It is, yeah, it looks lit on the gram because it is, but it's not like a lot of work goes into making it that way. It is not a party in the streets. So I will just say to make sure that you do a risk analysis, especially with COVID, especially depending on your immigration status, and actually don't go by yourself. Like, number one thing is never go by yourself. So that's my quick plug.
And I think
And
on top of that,
last thing to
ahead,
that, Christina and Jasmine, I would say think of it as you're planning your wedding or a really big event. You have a checklist and making sure you check every item on that box. Everything that Jasmine said is correct. Just checking those boxes, because again, you're putting yourself at risk and we're trying to protect everybody.
And I would also say ask around.
Mask and water.
Yeah, mask and COVID, bring your mask, bring your hand sanitizer, and ask around about the action. Like, ask people that you know are in this movement, in this moment, organizing, doing whatever. Ask them if they know about it. And if they're like, don't know about that one, then maybe you should stay away. I have definitely got phone calls from folks that were at actions planned by a person that when the action escalated and the police started arresting folks, and I called the organizer and was like, well, what's your plan for bail? She was like, I don't know, I'm at home, ma'am. So like, ask around, ask questions, and go with your gut. If it feels wrong, go with your gut and don't go.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, because first of all, I want to say that I love being around Black people, especially rowdy Black people, but I also have this Sandra, you are the bail person, you can't get arrested kind of mentality. So I just don't think, anyway, we'll get there. But I think that it is, you do feel good, you feel empowered as hell. And I also think that this is what has moved America, right? And not only America, you know, I get so excited when I see pictures from folks in Haiti, throughout the country. I'm like, Haiti, you got your own problems right now. COVID's going up, but they out protesting because people are dying here. And I think that we sometimes forget that America didn't be like, oh, one day y'all slaves, you can be free. It was pressure. It wasn't, oh, you know, maybe y'all should have equal rights. No, it was pressure. And so like, you got to keep pressure. And I want to shout out Asa, because Asa, I still die every time I think about his post. He was like, a protest with police is a parade. And I died laughing because I'm like, oh, I was at a few parades this last week. It wasn't a protest, it was actually a parade. When you don't necessarily feel as if, what is the purpose of this? And are we really moving people with this action? Nora, I know you had another question. Did we lose Nora?
No, sorry about that. Yes.
Okay.
The next question is from Gilbert to the panelists. Is it the time for Black people to honestly contemplate leaving the country in pursuit of predominantly Black nations? Should Black people be giving this concept a real consideration? That's an interesting question.
Can I go first? Point of privilege. I say yes and no because it reminds me, we have to always remind ourselves that this country is ours. Like, we built this country. They might gotta go, right? And so like, I wrestle with that because when I go to Haiti, which is Haiti is Black. They tell you Black, more classist issues than like, and maybe colorism, but folks just get that they're Black. It just feels good. You're with your people. It's different shades of Black. You just feel different. So on some level, I'm like, you know what, y'all can have this. But on the other level, I'm like, but actually we built this and y'all stole us and brought us here. So what does that look like? That's just my point of privilege perspective. It's open to any of the panelists.
So I can go because I have debated this for a hot minute, especially with my Black immigrant fam. So I 100% agree that like, this is our country. We built it. And every single moment of progress is tied to the sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears of Black people. And so why would we spend all of these generations perfecting this country for us to not actually be here when we achieve that goal, right? The other thing is that as a person who's a diaspora, right? So I'm a first generation American. I was born here. Both of my parents were born in Haiti and came here at different times. And I've lived in Haiti. I've gone back. I've done the go back thing. And it is easier said than done. Like, let us not glamorize. Like, I have fam in Ghana right now, and or in Kenya, and like, it is not an easy thing to do. And you actually bring with you all of the white supremacy and internalized oppression that we're escaping the US to your current context. So like, expat life is also really a replication of white supremacy. So let's be real about not going back to wherever and thinking that things will be great.
I can add to that as well. I am not in the place to be like, I'm leaving. I love my community. I love being here. I love being a Haitian-American. And that's an identity within itself, right? Like Christina, I did the expat thing. And I was like, yes, I need to go home. And when I say home, I need to come back to the US because there are things here that we tend to take for granted, like running water. There are certain things that we are accustomed to when we do leave and go to another country. We may not have that same level of comfort. And I am not ready to give that up quite yet. And that's me being completely transparent, and that's me being completely honest. And again,
no struggle life.
No. I've been there, done that. So with that being said, I definitely think, to Christina's point, we are here trying to fight for an America that was promised to us. This American dream, we can achieve that if we just do what the Constitution says that it's supposed to do. So I'm willing to fight to make sure that we live up to that standard. And I'm not going to be chased away from my home because I'm a little uncomfortable with the situation that's happening right now.
Yeah, and I've also struggled with this, like +1, +5 on what Christina said, because I also struggle with this of thinking about displacement of other folks, because so much of our white supremacy is ingrained. That's like, Black people go where? Like, to what country? And how are we going to treat the indigenous folks of that land with all of the privilege, this first world privilege that we bring with us? And what does that look like to take over land or live somewhere else. Like, and I struggle also a lot with that. And then also this conversation that's like, even having the idea that we could all just up and move is rooted in so much privilege. Like the net worth of Black women is $5. Move where? Like, move, go where? Where? How are we going to do that? Like, what does employment look like? Has anybody analyzed what that would look like for the economies and all these different places, the education systems, if there was a mass exodus of Black folks? And then also the privilege of knowing where you came from to be able to exit and go back somewhere. Ace's family is the history that they have is just on this land. Like there's a large ocean that's missing of where to go back to. So it's like, what do we do for those folks about trying to find this other place to live? I think that I would love to not just stay here for all the privileges that we do enjoy in the grand scheme of like globalism, but also what would it look like for Black and Indigenous folks to take back this land? And to build it together and to figure out what true sovereignty looks like in this place. And like Nancy said, to remain in our neighborhoods, but be given the freedom and the resources. We're not given, take back the freedom and the resources and the headspace for us to thrive. Every other time that we've tried to do that, bombs have been dropped on us, right? So what could it look like if we were just given the space to do our thing in community? We know best how to keep each other safe, how to take care of ourselves. Just give us that space to continue to do that and watch us contribute to the strength and health of this country and make it better than it is right now.
Oh man, y'all, yes, to all of y'all. Y'all should pay them for all of this. Pay-per-view. I'm joking. I think I wanna, we have about 25 minutes left. And I know there are questions that keep coming on. Nora, you can just flag us. Talk about, we started to go there with this is Caribbean American Heritage Month. Most of us are first generation Americans. And there is this, there was a call out to me specifically about whether or not Haitian American organizations are showing up in a real way. Do we understand that we're Black first here as these protests are happening? And tell me what you all think it looks like for Black communities, especially in South Florida, to get one, that they're Black first in this country, but to understand these issues in a bigger way. I often think that for me, for a lot of folks who've left their countries, the very reason why they left their country, to them, America's good. Like, what y'all talking about? This is good. I want this. Even with with the oppression, is still better from where they came from. So there's like y'all really tripping. This is actually good from where they came from before. So what do you say to those folks who don't really get it, are like, y'all some privileged people to be fighting about or demanding more for what's already decent for them already? I want to start with you, Christina.
So I think there are two things at play. So there's a generational divide, right? And I think when we look at our movements, when we look at people in leadership, like Caribbean American folks who are in leadership, there is clearly a first generation element because we are maximizing the risk and investment that our parents made into this country, right? And so we feel a duty to pay it forward and to continue to invest and make this country a better place. And so when we see that our constitutional rights challenged, we're rightfully outraged, right? And so that is like one thing that is at play. And I think it is on us to talk to our parents, our grandparents, our aunties and folks to say that, hey, remember that like, actually it's okay to express your outrage. Because there's this thing that we navigate, which is, well, I came here to like keep my head down, grind, make sure my kids are good. All of those things are accomplished. You all figure it out. When really you have the right to dignity and respect in your own community. And then the other thing that's at play is that there actually has been, I have witnessed even in my own family, this awakening, even for folks with class privilege due to COVID, where they are so outraged. I just think of like the amount of medical workers that are in my family and like having to to get like us like make like sew some masks for them or like ship like gowns and stuff like PPE, like it was so eye-opening to see that this country is not investing in the right things and that their work is not being respected, whether that's, you know, the displaced taxi drivers, the displaced, you know, home care workers, who are the nursing home workers that are overwhelmingly older Caribbean folks. Like, seeing that this country has basically left them to die. They're like, it's not my problem that you get COVID, basically, was really eye-opening, and is a pathway to then have the discussion about like there are mechanisms that you are entitled to being in this country to make sure that your rights and priorities are respected.
That's amazing. That is a real opportunity for us to make connections for people. Jasmine.
It's interesting for me because my parents are from the Caribbean. My dad's from St. Kitts. My mom's from Antigua. My mom came here when she was 5, and my dad came here after high school. My dad was taught to assimilate. Like, you're gonna get there, you're gonna speak the Queen's English. Like, don't stand out. We're gonna be good. And what that means for me and my siblings is that we had a pretty like Black American upbringing, like this African American where there's no Caribbean food that's cooked in my house. It wasn't taught to my mom. My dad brings his dialect out whenever he feels like it, but it's not something that we were taught. Like, you know, it's fascinating the way that translated into our upbringing and our attachment to our culture, right? My grandma makes some Caribbean food every so often, but that's kind of it because they were taught to assimilate. But in doing this work, it's been interesting to see the transformation in my dad, because he'll say all of this stuff about my first boyfriend was African American, and he was like, okay, so you're gonna dump him now? Like, it was like not a conversation. It was like, you're done. Like, that's not a thing. To then hear him share his story about police violence and being thrown up against a car and him making that connection, right? And going to jail for a night and my mom being all concerned. I think part of it to me is also just everyone's willingness to have a conversation and storytelling. I'm sure so many of our Caribbean folks have some type of interaction with police or jail or whatever. That's like, if we get down to it and have that conversation, you could be like, see, this is what we're talking about. They didn't care what island you were from when they threw you up against that car. Like, they didn't care what island you were from when they threw you in jail or tried to deport you or whatever. Like, this is where we're at to bridge that gap. But that takes, I think, a lot of openness. And that speaks to Christina with the generational divide, is like, how are we willing to have, as younger folks, like have that really hard and resistant conversation, but also how are our elders able to come to the table not feeling like y'all young folks don't know nothing about whatever, or like back in my day, you know, this is how things were. So we can build a stronger, more organized and intergenerational movement that gets people to understand, like, white supremacy doesn't care about the island that you came from when your skin looks like this, like when you can't pass for anything else. So I mean, this is a Black people problem. This is a white people problem also. And it doesn't discriminate based on the nitty gritty of island or accent or culture or whatever.
That's really great. I'm gonna turn to Nancy, because there is a Haitian man from New York named Abner Lima. And I'm not sure if you all ever heard his story. In New York, was sodomized by police officers. I remember I was talking to my friend who's from New York, and she said she remembers Haitians taking the street. It wasn't done because he was Haitian, it was done because he was Black. They took a plumber and whatever those things called, what the plumbers use. Plunger, thank you. And Christina, you may know more about this because you're a New Yorker. They took a plunger to his area and really did a lot of damage, beat him up, a lot of medical bills. And, you know, we have stories in our communities from being Black. And so, you know, this has also been an opportunity for us to say, no, it's not like a African American issue. It's also issues that we've experienced. We know personal stories of folks in our community. We're Black, And I think, you know, there needs to be a lot of work done in South Florida specifically. But we know that there's so many stories that folks don't know of these kinds of things that have happened. Nancy, do you have any perspective on that, or you want to add anything?
Yeah, I definitely do. I would love to touch on education. So, to touch on everyone's point, what very well said, developing a curricula to introduce our kids at a very young age to the nuance and the complexity of what it means to be Caribbean, what it means to be Black is very important, because a lot of that history is taken away from us. And so I say that because as a Haitian American, I was fortunate enough to be raised in a household where I was always told we helped free the Black world, right? We were the first nation to really show what Black liberation looks like. And that history was not shared. So when we stand in solidarity, we should stand as Black people because we help pave that way. And we also need to hear from different perspectives, like my co-panelists had mentioned, from the women's perspective, the Blacks, the Latinx, Native Americans, because we all share what it means to be marginalized, right? And so we learn from each other in that instinct. And lastly, creating this education system will also push for inclusion. It will help our students think critically. Like, how can I work through this? I understand that we're a little different. How can we come and work together in solidarity? And to my Latinx folks, I'm speaking to y'all, allyship, right? Y'all carry some type of privilege, especially here in South Florida. So, and I wrote this down, excuse me. Take on the struggle as your own. Stand up even when you feel scared. Transfer those benefits of privilege to those who lack it. And then acknowledge that while you too feel pain, the conversation is not about you. It's really not. So really understand how you can uplift our struggle, but also support us in that instance. And that for our Black folks, it's a matter of where we got dropped off. We are all Black. You know, like they dropped some of us off at Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba, but at the end of the day, we are Black people.
Right.
So coming together.
I'm going to bring us to solution space as we run out of time. Nora, is there any other questions that came up? Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question about banking. There's a lot of talk about banking Black. And so the question comes from Natalia. She says, where do you do your banking? Do you personally recommend Black-owned banks for business and personal banking?
I have an experience, but we won't talk about that. I push for credit unions because they are amazing. I don't give my money to Wells Fargo, basically on how they feel around the pipeline and environmentally. So I divest my money based on my values.
Right.
So I keep my money in credit unions.
Any else? Go ahead.
Oh, I can go really quickly. I think that it's all on all of us to look and see how the banks that we're banking are, like, what are they prioritizing? What are they invested in? Who banks with them? So, Bank of America recently divested from private prisons after a campaign. And so I would say that if you'd like to bank Black, do it. But if you, everybody should be questioning where their money is and seeing if where their money is aligned with their values.
I'll add right before Jasmine, I agree. I think you should look into your banks. I have a few accounts everywhere, $100 here, $100 there. I do have money in One United. I think it's important for us to understand that the more customers you have or the more clients you have, the more you can, the more you have resources to be that. Oftentimes, some of our, I would say privilege, or some of my privilege actually comes from, I can't compare apples to oranges. I can't compare one of the big three, one of the big five to, let's be frank, One United. It's just apples to oranges. And what's our role in helping them get there? My role is keeping my, $100, $200 there every pay period to make sure that I'm invested. And I also would say about Women United, they've been really good to Black businesses. They help folks when the employee protection, the PPP loan was going out. They were really in the community, making sure that folks can get access. Folks, small Black businesses basically can get access, and we're walking people through the process in ways that big banks weren't necessarily looking out for these organizations because they didn't have large budgets. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And I'm not sure if you have anything to add, Jasmine.
I feel like there's an internal conversation that we need to have with Black folks about Black businesses. But just want to reaffirm what Christina said about doing the research about where your money is. And I think also not feeling horrible if you can't get to a One United. They have one branch in South Florida. So we get it. Like, there's other ways that you can be involved. There's other ways that you can support the movement. There's other ways you can support Black businesses. So yeah, but I also think that there's an internal family conversation that Black folks need to have about our business.
Offline. Absolutely. So tell me, Nora, if there aren't any other questions, we're going to go to solutions and what y'all next steps would be for our community.
No more questions right now, but I just want to say that the overall sentiment in the chats is that you ladies are amazing. One of the best chats that apparently has been going on when it comes to these topics that we are discussing tonight. So just want to let you all know that, the chat's popping right now, and people are just blown away at some of the comments that have been made by all of you. So thank you.
Tell them to share the live. And so I won't. Avanse Ansanm hasn't done any endorsements, so we'll figure that out in a little bit. But let's talk about solutions. So what's next? We are at a pivotal point. People are seeing a historic point. There are a lot of protests. We went through COVID. First, we went through an election that we thought would never happen. Then COVID happened. We're seeing arrests. We're seeing people not paid enough. They don't have benefits. All of it is just like a pile up. What's next? How do people engage? This series is called Not Voter, meaning we'll go vote. Voting doesn't fix everything. We're going to hold people accountable as well. What do everyday people need to do in order to get us there, whatever there looks like? I'm going to start with you, Nancy.
So 2 things. Fill out your census and vote. When I say fill out your census, Avanse Ansanm is also looking for volunteers to help make phone calls. Please tap into that for those who said they wanted to help. Communities of color are undercounted, and historically we've been shown that we're undercounted and haven't been represented. And with our census dollars, we are missing out on billions of dollars to help fund our communities and what representation looks like in our communities, right? When we talk about the COVID crisis, when you fill out the census, that determines how many ventilators are in your area. So when people are seeking medical attention, those funding sources really help our communities. When we talk about housing, how much affordable housing is in certain areas, that contributes to that. Our FEMA resources, we're talking about hurricane season right now, and with all of the funding being pulled out of FEMA to help combat COVID, what's going to happen when half of Miami's underwater and Black folks are displaced? So those are conversations that we need to have. So fill out your census, please. Second, voting. There are 2 elections coming up. We have the primary election on August 18th, and we have the general election on November 3rd. So we have candidates on this panel who are running. Jasmine, August 18th, and I'm running November 3rd. So if you like what we've said, donate, support us, and let us know exactly what is the issues that you resonate with so we can build a platform around that. That's how you hold us accountable. That's what representation means. And lastly, if you don't know somebody who's registered to vote, get them out there and register them to vote. The last day to get someone registered to vote for the August 18th election is July 20th. We are literally fighting for our lives. It is important that we get our voices out there, that we are voting yes, marching and protesting is very key to making change, but also being at the ballot box also contributes to that change. Just as we get them in, we need to vote them out. So that's my solution.
Absolutely. Christina.
So a few things. So one is it is super important to vote, particularly in our state and local elections, especially when we're looking at the issues that we care about and where our outrage is being geared to in this moment. So if you do want to see material conditions change, definitely make sure you vote in August, which is when most of the local elections are happening. And then make sure to fill out everything on your ballot in November. Because I know we like to skip things in Florida. Fill out every category, please. The other thing is that it's not simple, like simply voting is not enough, especially when we are going to be facing an unprecedented amount of voter suppression. And so that means we need to be on our P's and Q's. We need to actually be investing in voter protection. And that means also volunteering with civic organizations on election day to make sure that we are monitoring the polls, to make sure that nobody is suppressing our vote, whether that's turning folks away, whether that's curing signatures not going the right way, provisional ballots going missing, all of these things that can happen. The other thing that I would encourage folks is to vote by mail. Not everybody is in a place where they're going to be able to physically risk their health to go to a polling location. Let's be real about our community. My mom is immunosuppressed. I'm not trying to encourage her to go to the polls. But what I will do is make sure she gets that ballot and make sure that it's turned in a right amount of time and that it's filled out correctly. So there is stuff for folks to do at home if you don't feel comfortable actually going to a polling location. The other thing is that there are plenty of organizations that are going to be holding elected officials accountable right now, not just at the ballot box. And so link up with organizations like the Black Collective, like the Black Lives Matter Alliance, like Dream Defenders, and Avanse Ansanm, and my worker center, and all of the organizations. We could drop a link, a list of organizations that are doing the work and holding elected officials accountable in this moment to make sure that they are making the decisions, the right decisions right now in response to this moment. And finally, like I said, am passionate about citizenship, and in the civic engagement continuum is making sure that we make more voters, especially to my Caribbean folks. I know we wait and have our green card for like 20 years. And the thought is, oh, well, we're citizen, we can do everything but vote. And that is not actually reality. So the only way to protect our families and ourselves in this moment is to become citizens. And so if you are interested in helping folks become citizens, we are looking for volunteers. The price of the application fee for citizenship is currently $725 and is expected to go up to $1,100. So apply now. And also we're launching a fund to cover people's application fee. So that is our take on mutual aid. So let's pay it forward for our most vulnerable folks to be able to have full citizenship and ensure that they're able to vote in the long term. So definitely follow us at the Office of New Americans, or hit me up personally, DM me, so that we can get connected. We do need volunteers to help do translation, to do tech stuff. A lot of our stuff is on Zoom right now, and mentoring folks through U.S. history and civics so that they can pass their interview.
Absolutely. Jasmine, also reference Georgia, because I think Georgia and Florida, ooh. So reference what we're seeing in Georgia, because I know Nancy and Christina talked about voting, voter protection, but what happened in Georgia, I think, is like a real precursor to what may happen in Florida. And a point of privilege, I will say, Haiti has rejected elections for less, y'all. For less. Right, Christina? We said, actually, let's revote on that. Let's do this again, because we're not taking this. So what does that look like? I know I'm gonna just pause here.
Okay. So for folks that may not know what you're talking about, in Georgia, folks were in line for 10 hours to vote, trying to be socially distant with their masks. They said that the last voter in line in Georgia voted at 12:37 a.m. Like that is a tool of voter suppression, like both Christina and Nancy have said. And it should be a lesson to us to prepare for our next election that's in a little over 2 months, and then the general election in November. How are we make sure people are safe at the polls? How are we making sure we have enough polling locations that we don't have people waiting in line for that many hours? Like, what are we providing to people to make this system as easy as it should be to cast a ballot here in Florida? And we should be demanding those things of now. I know in Broward County, and I believe Dade and Palm Beach, the supervisors of elections said that they would mail out applications to every eligible voter for a vote by mail ballot. So folks need to be looking for that and apply for it. Even if you still decide to vote in person, at least you have it as a backup. And I know a lot of folks are saying they don't trust the post office, and I get it, and I have compassion about it. You can also still take that physical vote by mail ballot and drop it off at the polling location and see it go into the machine. So it's just a really good just backup plan. But we need to be strategizing around that as organizers, as folks that are in these organizations. Like, what are we going to do to make sure our people don't feel disenfranchised? And we're demanding from now that this looks different and that Florida is not all over CNN for these problems. I would also say that so when we talk about oppression and suppression and all these different things, it strikes us at an internalized, interpersonal, and institutional level. And the solutions also have to meet us at those same levels. So how are folks making a commitment to divesting from oppressive systems, whether that's racism, white supremacy, heteronormativity, patriarchy, all of these systems? What is your personal commitment to divesting from that? By reading, learning, listening to Black women, Indigenous folks, queer folks. Like, how are you in relationship with people that you can build yourself and your ability to be able to talk about these issues and what's going on? And then on an interpersonal level, talk to your family. Like, there are so many people that want to hit the streets and want to be able to yell at electeds, but then you sit at a dinner table with someone that is saying terrible and awful things. Start with your family and have these conversations, and then again, transform outwards. And then we have to just keep agitating, educating, organizing, and then we legislate, which is part of the reason why I'm running for office in Florida House District 95, is because I understand that the state level has so much power to transform the conditions of our people on a regular basis. It can buffer the federal, but then it can also provide so much dignity to the local and municipal electeds to do what's best for our people. So we need to be forcing better legislation. And then if you have the resources, give them. Pay Black women and Black organizations for their work, support candidates, support folks that are out here doing the work if you have the resources to give them. I would even argue against donating to large national organizations. Like Christina is here, Office of New Americans needs resources, right? Miami Worker Center needs resources. We need to bring that money back home. So bring it a little bit closer for us to be able to transform here in Florida and transform here in South Florida. That's what I would say that people can do as far as solutions in these moments.
Thank you so much to the entire panel. You all are phenomenal. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. For Caribbean Heritage Month, to even start off our this series that we're going to do. Next up, we're going to talk about all these offices that are coming, that people are voting on. What does that mean to be a state elected official, a state rep, or a senator? What does it mean to be a city commissioner or a county commissioner? Let's break down what those roles are. We're going to do that for local level. We're going to do it for the state level. We're going to tackle the judges so that people could be really clear on where the power lies so that we're making informed decisions. I am forever grateful for you all for your time. Jasmine's running, Nancy's running. I don't take it for granted that y'all could be fundraising right now. Y'all could be doing anything else, but you chose to be on this platform and share your experience and your thoughts on that to better our community. Check them out. They are running for office. They need volunteers. They need money. We cannot endorse. We haven't done our endorsement process yet, but they are friends of mine. And y'all know if they friend of mine, they friend of yours. So check them out. Love on them. Jasmine, drop your website. What's your website so people can find you?
JasmineForFlorida.com. And you can also find me on every platform available except TikTok. I can't either. And NancyMatea.com. Nancy's my girl too. And Christina, everything that you're doing. I love Fran as well with the Black Collective. Support. Show up
Everything is political, y'all. Your health, education, transportation, immigration, everything is political. Everything can be tied back to a policy. So it is important that we show up, not voter. Thank you so much for your time this evening. And I wish you all well. Look, keep your mask on, wash your hands. COVID is still out there in these Florida streets. And I'll see y'all at these protests. Thank you so much, phenomenal panel. And we'll see y'all later.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone. Thanks for watching.
All right, thank you. Mm.